So yeah, as Dave said, my name is Andrew. I'm a teacher trainer here. I'm from New Zealand originally, which explains my accent. I don't speak like an American or with an American accent. And I'm based in Taipei. And as Dave said, I've been working in education a long time. So I like to try and bring that experience to you in the sessions that we're doing. And a little fun fact about me is that I live in a house in a city, the city of Taipei, with 8 people, a dog, a rabbit, 3 finches, a duck, and 2 chickens. So yeah, there's a lot of animals in my house. My sister-in-law wanted to be either a vet or a farmer. I'm not quite sure, but we have a lot of pets. So there you go, a little fun fact about me. But anyway, let's talk about what we're going to do today, right? So today we're talking about learning management systems, and we're going to talk at the beginning about what is a learning management system, okay? And then after that, we're going to look at the different benefits of this, right? So how does a learning management system help students to practice? How does it help inform teachers about what's going on with their students so that they can make good decisions in the classroom? How does it inform parents so that parents know what's going on and parents can understand the education that their children are receiving better, okay? And in the end, we'll just kind of wrap it all up and talk about the benefits overall for everybody. How does this really help everybody involved in the child's education? Today, we are kind of focusing on young learners specifically in the examples and things I'll be looking at, but many of the things I mention apply to all ages. So if you're here because you teach older students, that's okay. You can still take some of those things away. And on that note, I actually want to open up a quick poll, and I want to see who's here today. So on the screen, you should be able to see a poll which basically says, what ages do you teach? Okay, so if you could vote quickly in the poll, I'll leave it open for about 15 seconds here. You can choose more than one if you teach more than one age range. But I'm just getting an idea of what sort of ages we teach. Okay, I'll leave it open for about 10 more seconds. And 5, we've got 50% of people in this, great. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. It's a good indication. So sharing the results, I can see that most or the majority of people teach teens or maybe young learners, like 43%, 33%. About a third of us, 30%, teach adults or university students, and a few people teach very young learners, kindergarten, and a few are not teachers. That's fine. But this just gives us an indication of who we're talking to today. But also, as I just mentioned, a lot of the ideas today should be able to be used across the age ranges, okay? So most of these things will work for anyone, although I am focusing a little on younger learners. Okay, great. So let's close that off. And let's get stuck in to figuring out all of these things and how it's increasing the educational outcomes of any student using an LMS, okay? Great, so let's start with an activity, okay? Now, throughout the session, I'm going to do a little activity with you. It's a numbers-based activity. What I want you to do is when I show you some numbers, I'm going to read them and you can just read them out loud with me, okay? You don't write them down. You don't need to do anything else. You just need to say the numbers with me. That's all you need to do, okay? So the first one is there are 4 numbers. It's the same number every time. And so I just want you to read along with me as I show you the numbers. So here we go. So 47,60613, 47,60613, 47,60613, 47,60613. Okay, good. Okay, now, the reason why I'm doing that will become obvious later. Don't worry about it for now, okay? Good. Thanks, someone's putting it in the chat box. It's fine, you don't need to do that, it's good. Okay, so let's talk about what a learning management system is, okay? At the base level, a learning management system is anything that lets you manage learning, okay? So when I first started teaching a long time ago, then most of the systems that my schools were using, they were using paper for everything. Oh, I can't write today. They were using paper, okay? As computers started popping up in schools, they started to use Excel or spreadsheets to track student data as well. Sometimes they were using some other sorts of systems too. But each of these kind of systems is or can be a learning management system, something to manage learning. But today, because we're in, getting well into the 21st century now, we have a lot of digital platforms that allow us to track students, assign work, record progress, and these kinds of things. So mainly today, I'm going to be talking about digital platforms, or the example of a digital platform. But really, again, the ideas I'm using can apply to just about any system, okay? Because I work for National Geographic Learning, I'm going to be focusing on this kind of system here, which is the one we use with some of our popular young learner programs like Look or Our World. And you can see here what I've made in the system, and I'll be referencing these as I go through. I've got some fake classes set up with some fake students that we're going to look at. The reason I'm using fake students is just for privacy. We're not going to share any real names or real data matching with real names. The data I'm showing you is real, but it's just not attached to a student's name. I copied data into fake student accounts, okay? A small class, only 5 kids, but we'll see what we can get out of it today, okay? Good one. Okay, so let's take a look at what we usually do with it. Well, the 2 main things we usually do with a learning management system are assignments and tracking, right? And so we can set digital assignments for our students, okay? And by this, I mean kind of like the online homework. You log into the online platform and you can do the activities. Now, the advantage of these kind of systems today is a lot of these things are automatically graded. And this is great because it saves you time, right? Okay, I'm sure, as teachers, you've got a lot of burdens on your time. If things get automatically graded, that makes life a lot easier for us, right? So that's a nice feature. And it lets us track the student scores. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what we can do with this kind of information when we have it and how it helps the students. Okay, so these are the basic functions. We're not going to go through in little detail and see how we do these things, but let's see what we can get out of them. Okay, great. So the first one is a student benefit, and the benefit is having additional practice, right? So students will always benefit from more practice in the classroom. Okay, the more activities you can do in class, the better they will get, right? And then if we can give them homework, then they will get more practice. And if we can give them digital homework as well, maybe they get even more, okay? So I think we all agree that more practice is good for memory and retention and skill building, right? But I have a question for you. How much practice do you need? Okay, so I have a question. If I said, let's say I teach you a new vocabulary word, okay? I teach you a new piece of vocabulary that you did not know before, and I want you to know the pronunciation, the meaning, how to put it in a sentence, right? Those kind of basic usages of vocabulary, right? How many times do you think you have to say it, hear it, be exposed to it, and use it to really keep that vocab, like forever, right? That you're never going to forget it, right? So someone in the chat box has already said 4. And another person said maybe 3, okay? And I'm going to say those numbers are way too small, way too small. 12 times, 10 times, many times is right, okay? 6 to 10, the more the better, that's true. At least 100, said somebody, and then it disappeared through the chat box. Okay, this is interesting, right? 26, that's very specific. 40, okay, a lot, yeah, it is a lot. And it might surprise you how much you actually need to do it. One of the people who trained me when I was first becoming a language teacher had a degree in psychology. He was a practicing clinical psychologist and also a teacher, okay? And so he knew a lot about education. He knew a lot about the brain and how it works. And he said, there are studies about this. It can take typically 100 to 180 times that you need to be exposed to and use a piece of vocabulary until your brain remembers that forever, okay? And that number surprises you a little. I can see some exclamation marks in the chat box. It is surprising, right? I did not believe him, this person who told me this, until I moved to a different city in Greater China, and I needed to learn a new word to tell taxi drivers to make a U-turn, okay? Because the word I knew in one Chinese dialect wasn't applicable to the dialect in this other city. And it took me a long time to remember the new word for U-turn. And I kept forgetting. And every time I got in a taxi, I keep, what's that word again, right? And it wasn't until I'd had that experience myself, I was like, yeah, wow, this is taking me a long time to remember, right? But it is surprising that it does take a lot of times. Now, I missed the comments in the chat box, but when I did the session earlier, about 12 hours ago, some people were saying it depends on context, right? It depends on how you give that to the student, and is it a really useful everyday kind of word? And those things are true, right? They help. But the fact remains that you still need a lot of practice to take on new information, okay? So the first benefit here, additional practice is going to help students a lot with this, okay? Good. Okay, now, time for numbers again. Now, this is a different number. We are going to do this number one time only, okay? Are you ready? So here we go. Say it with me. 6457929. Okay? Done. Right. Again, reasons will become obvious later. Okay. So let's look at another benefit here. Thanks, Anita. You're typing them in the chat box. Okay. Another teacher benefit here is when we have students doing activities in a learning management system, we get information. Okay. We are gathering data. And if you remember, what are my degrees in? What did I study at university? Dave mentioned it like 10 minutes or so ago. Does anyone remember what I studied? I'm looking in the chat box to see if anyone remembers. Physics, there we go. My degrees or my study was a lot in experimental physics. So I'm a very data heavy kind of person. I'm really into data, right? And when we look at student activity and student scores, it gives us data, okay? And data is used to build information, and information helps us make decisions, okay? So Carly Fiorina, who's the ex-chief executive officer of Hewlett-Packard, said the goal is to turn data into information, information into insight. And then one level down from that would be insight into decisions and actions, right? But this is the sort of thing that we need to do with data, is we need it to tell us a story, okay? If we look at some data, what story does it tell us about our learners or about the situation that's going on with the learning at the moment, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some data and we're going to see what story it tells us, okay? So what I have here is here are my 5 fake students. I've got Amy, Bill, Carol, Dave, and Ed. Okay, and on the kind of in the middle of the screen here, I've got some data. Okay, now I'm going to make it a little bigger just so you can see it a little easier. There we go. So I've got some course completion data. Oops, excuse me. Hang on, go back. There we go. Some course completion data and an average score. Okay, so looking at this data, what information, what story are we getting out of this data? If you can put in the chat box, what do you read into the numbers that are on the screen here? What does it tell you? Let's see what people think. Yeah, there's scores, that's true. We've got some scores. What do the scores tell us, right? Okay, so some not completing the assignment, that's true. I'm just making the chat box bigger. Dave needs more attention. Dave is this one. Okay, Dave is down here. We're saying Dave needs more attention. Not everyone is the same, says Marciano. That's Masuro, sorry. They may not understand. That's true, right? Which student does not understand? Some learners are excellent. We have some progress there. It's not always necessary to complete the course to score the grades. Okay. Ed hasn't done anything. Yeah, that could be true. Ed's down the bottom here with zeros. Okay, so we've got a bunch of different information that we can draw out of this, right? Now, this is very high level data. This is for the course as a whole, okay? But if we dig into the data a little bit more, we can see a little bit more, okay? So let's take a look at a little bit more of the data by looking at the next screen, which you already saw a flash of. These are the individual activities that Amy has done, okay? So if you look at Amy's results here, the information on the right-hand side, so kind of these 3 columns here, you'll notice sometimes the time doesn't show, that's just because sometimes the activity is cut off or the time actually doesn't matter for the activity, okay? So don't worry about the missing numbers, okay? So what do we see here? What do we see in the numbers for Amy? What do we see here for Amy? So she's got some progress. Yeah, she seems to be doing reasonably well. Yeah, she's doing great. This is Natasha. She's almost completed everything. Yeah, she's almost perfect. That's true. So she's got close to 100 on everything. Higher completion rate, but with more than one attempt, says Jeremiah. Good. Yeah, so sometimes she did 2 attempts to get the 100%, or 3, right, or 4. Okay, so that's interesting. Maybe good development. Okay, maybe she's doing well. She's good in this subject. Okay, good. So we're getting an understanding of what Amy's like by looking at this data, right? Okay, now let's look at a different student. Okay, we're going to look at Bill. So if I go to Bill here, what do we see about Bill? What's the story of Bill? Peavy says, Bill is smart. He's got perfect scores, says Natasha. Okay. He's really good. Okay, Bill is a fast learner. Okay, maybe, or maybe not, right? He only took 1 attempt. Yeah, that's true. All of his attempts are only 1. Bill is good. Bill is intelligent. Maybe. I could give you another story about this. I could say Bill's older brother is doing his homework for him, right? That could be a very different story, right? Yeah, right. Maybe he's misplaced. That's a nice one. I like that one, right? Yeah, perfect score in a short time. Yeah, so maybe he is really good, or maybe he's getting help. Not really sure, right? But we're getting some idea that, yeah, maybe we need to check more about Bill because he's so good, perhaps. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Who's next? We've got Carol, right? Let's take a look at Carol here. What's the story of Carol that we can see in the data here? Yeah, it's true, Karen. Grades don't always show the reality. That's very true. Grades don't always show reality. What do we see for Carol here? What do we think about Carol? Declining results. Okay. Maybe these ones down here she hasn't attempted yet. Yeah, she hasn't accomplished all the tasks. Maybe she has some problems with later parts. Okay, maybe you're saying that because the number of attempts is increasing, but the score is not. Okay, unable to do some things. Perhaps she's ill, perhaps she doesn't have time. Yeah, maybe she's just doesn't, she just didn't get to these things yet, right? Maybe, right? Yeah. Maybe she's running into problems. Maybe she's losing motivation because she can't get 100% on this activity. Maybe she lost her connection. That could be true, right? Yeah, but there's a lot of different stories we can get out of this data, okay? And these are things maybe we need to follow up on, right? Or maybe we need more data, okay? Okay, let's take a look at the next one, Dave. So what do we see about Dave here? Dave looks a little bit different, doesn't he? What do we see from Dave here? So he's kind of average, up and down. Yeah, Dave's scores are not so consistent, but he's trying, says Maria. Yeah, he's doing everything, right? He's doing it all. Okay, he's up and down. Maybe he's struggling. Maybe. Okay. Could be. Unstable results, inconsistent. Yeah, maybe, right? So yeah, there's a different story for Dave. Even though his average might compare similarly to other students, he might have a very different story when we look at the data like this, right? Okay, what about the last one? I think you know who the last one is. It's Ed. What do we see about Ed here? What's the story of Ed? What are we seeing here for Ed? OMG, okay. He's not at school. Maybe he's absent, okay. Maybe he's missing. Maybe he's not doing anything. Maybe he has no internet connection, good. Maybe he doesn't know how to log into the system to be able to do his homework. Maybe he's sick, yeah, right? Maybe he's lazy, yeah. With no data, it's really hard to tell anything about Ed, right? He could be a really smart student that just isn't doing anything. Maybe it's hard to know, right? Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of different stories we can get out of this data, right? But the question then is, now that we've got this data, what decisions do we make with this kind of information? What can we do about it, right? So remember, we've got our 5 students, right? We've got Amy, we've got Bill, Carol, Dave, and Ed. What might we be able to do? If this is my class, what might we be able to do to move learning forward? What do we think? What do we think? Do we need, Michael says assessment. Maybe, Michael, we need to assess our learners a little bit more. That could be true. Maybe we need some formative assessment, or maybe we need to set some assessments for them in the system. Use a better learning management system. Okay, so Kim, the learning management system collects the data, but it doesn't affect student performance, okay? Student performance comes from other sources. We'll talk about that in a minute, right? Okay, Laura says maybe give differentiated activities. Okay, so maybe because Amy and Bill are doing quite well, we can give them one set of activities to work on. And maybe for these 3 here, we need to give them a different activity to help improve them, perhaps. That could be one thing we could do, sure. So we could go with differentiated instruction, right? Okay, so I'm gonna use shorthand and write that, differentiated instruction, right? What else might we do here with these guys? Different kind of activities based on capacity. Yep, good. Personalize and level to the needs of particular students. Yeah, maybe Bill needs to go up a level, right? Maybe Ed or Carol, maybe Ed needs to drop back, but we don't know because we don't have much data, right? Maybe we focus our attention on the students who maybe need more help. That's true, right? So maybe we're going to do that. Here's another one we could do as well, is maybe we want to do some sort of student-centered work in our classroom, maybe peer activities. And so maybe what we do is we put Amy maybe together with Carol, and they do an activity together, and Bill goes with Dave and Ed and they do one together. And that way the students who are apparently doing well can help the students who are maybe having some challenges. We could do that as well, right? Yeah, exactly. So Gina's saying exactly the same thing in chat. Buddy system, says Maria. Yeah. So these are some techniques or strategies we have to try and do this. But maybe also just for Ed, maybe we just need to have a quick check with Ed or his parents is, can you log in? Do you know what to do in the system, right? Maybe for Carol, it's, did you run out of time to finish all of the work, right? Is that why it didn't get all done? So there could be other simple non-educational explanations why the results are the way they are. We need to keep finding out more information, okay? Good. But what it does tell us is it gives us good stories that we can tell ourselves about our students so we can then make some choices. That's the purpose, okay? So I hope that one makes sense, okay? Good one. Okay. Right. Now, the other thing we can do, someone up above, I forget the name, sorry, mentioned assessment. Maybe with my students, what I could do is I could change the activity where they had lots of tries at the activities. Maybe I set some activities where they have one try only, and then it becomes like an assessment in the system. And I can do that in this particular system by choosing an option down here that lets me decide, is this like a quiz or test, or is this just practice? Right, where they can keep doing it many, many times. So, yeah, it could be trial and error, says Simonet, right? So this is one way, maybe we can change the activity a little so that we can get the right kind of information out of it, okay? Good. Okay, so now that we've talked about teacher benefits a bit, the last thing I just want to mention here is formative assessment. Usually this is what you do in class, right? As the students are doing things, you're checking on their ability as you go, formative assessment, right? So as we see the data, maybe there's elements that we need to keep reteaching because maybe the students are weak in those areas. Maybe there's areas we can skip over quickly because the students apparently know them from the things we have. So maybe everybody's good on vocabulary, but needs more work on grammar, for example, okay? But then that way we can provide more opportunities, not just for practice, but for the right practice, the practice that they need, the needed practice, okay? So combining the data from the system with formative assessment when you're teaching the students, together that lets you pick the right pieces of practice to give your students to move them forward, okay? So I hope that makes sense, right? Good one. Just looking in the chat box here, yeah, Jeremiah says the number of attempts also gives us information. Maybe students can't get it and they just keep retrying, right? Or it could be a connectivity issue, right? So there's different reasons why those things might happen. Nice. Good one. Okay, time for numbers again. Now this is the same number as last time. Just say it one more time with me. 6457929. And we're moving on. Okay, good. Okay, now time to switch to parents. Okay, why are parents important? Why are parents important here? Why am I talking about parents when we're talking about students and learning? What do you think? Well, the thing here is parents at the end of the day, especially for young learners, are the customers, right? It doesn't matter whether you're talking about private learning, private language learning, or if you're in a public school, parents are the choice makers. You can think of them as customers as to where their students or their children, sorry, go to school, right? They choose which school, right? They choose the day school, they choose the after school or the study school or whatever it might be, right? And parents will always want validation about the choices that they're making. They want to know that they made the right sort of decisions and they're getting the best for their kids, right? One way to show them that is to show them how their students perform. And one way to do that is to use a learning management system, okay? They need feedback, exactly. They need involvement, right? As we're seeing in the chat box, okay? So the more they know, I've written here, the more business you have. Now that's a little bit of a for-profit way of thinking, but you could also think of the business. If you're a public school teacher, your business is developing your own career, right? If parents know a lot and they're becoming very happy with what you're doing to educate their child, then that's going to reflect back on you and it's going to enhance your career as a teacher, right? So while I've written the word business here, as a public school teacher, you're your own business, right? You're developing your own career along the way, okay? Okay, now Renee, actually interesting, I just noticed in the chat box, Renee says parents are enforcers. I'm going to switch that word a little bit and I'm going to say parents are enablers. Parents are enablers, okay? But they need information to enable. And we'll see what I mean by that in a minute, right? Okay, so what we want to show parents in the system is we want the parents to be able to specifically see what they're getting right and wrong, what's happening in the system, okay? They can see the activities, hopefully, in the system, and they can see where their child is succeeding and where they're failing, and then parents can enable more practice. Now, maybe they're an enforcer, or maybe they're an encourager, or maybe they're just giving feedback to the teacher as well, okay? So let's see how parents can do that. Now, this looks like the teacher screen I showed before, but actually this is in a student account and it shows the parent view of their child, okay? Now, in a good system, like the ones we use, they cover, privacy concerns are covered. A parent can only see the results of their own child. They do not see anyone else's results, right? And that's the way our systems are set up at National Geographic Learning, right? The parents can only see their own kids' results. But what we can see here, maybe this is Amy, and so what the parent can see is for this particular assignment, their child has managed to get almost everything right, just this one's not quite right, okay? And so the parent might wonder, okay, what did they get wrong, right? Now, if the parent is able to go into the system and see that, that's kind of useful, right? So in the system that we use, that's a built-in function, and in other systems it can be as well, right? Where if when a parent looks at the activity, they can open a little view and they can see the specific activity that their child was working on, okay? So here it's basically a kind of a spelling activity. It has audio. So the students listen to a word, for example, board, and then they have to rearrange the letters to make it work, okay? So this one they got right. However, this one, you can see the student didn't get it right and the parent can see exactly what went wrong, okay? And then in the next one, they got that one right, okay? So the advantage here is the parent can see the mistake and then maybe they can coach the student. Maybe they can just say to the student, try it again because maybe I don't know English, so you have to do it by yourself, but try it again until you get it right, okay? But this is one way that parents, knowing what's happening, can help the student to keep practicing and keep improving, okay? So giving parents information is a really good benefit from a learning management system as well, okay? Yeah, and as some people are saying in the chat box, yeah, they help empower their kids. They're the pivot, right? And parents also learn from the lessons so that they can support their child as well. That's very true. Okay, good job. Okay, now one more time with numbers. This is the same number as last time. One more time, 6457929. You don't need to put it in the chat box. Don't waste your time. We're moving forward. Okay, so next one. I've jumped back to students again. I've jumped back to students, but now the reason is different. Now we're talking about the motivation of students to succeed, okay? So I'm going to jump into a little bit of psychology here for a second. Most young learners that I've met are usually quite competitive with others or with themselves. Now, does anyone know why young learners might be competitive? Now, young learners, just to clarify, I'm talking 6 to 12 years old. 6 to 12-year-old students. Why are those kind of learners competitive? Does anyone know a reason why in the chat box, why they might be competitive? I'll give you a second to put anything in the chat box down here. They love to play, okay. And play can become competitive, maybe, okay. Maybe parents are pressuring them. That can be true, but usually kids don't become competitive because their parents tell them to. They love to win, that's true. They have a need for achievement. They maybe seek attention, that could be true. They're observant and want to apply their learning, maybe. That's very self-motivated. They don't want to have a bad score, maybe because that leads to punishment. That could be true, yeah. Peer pressure, there we go. Now we're starting to get onto some things. Peer pressure is a big one, right? Maybe they don't have a lot of other priorities. Yeah, you're touching on a point there. Okay. So I'm going to give you a reason from psychology why students become competitive at this age. This affects students across every culture. It does not matter what culture you're in. This is a human condition. Okay. Before you're 6 years old, you're more egocentric. You're not so aware of the people around you. Life is all about me. Before I'm kind of 6 years old, right? Once I get to elementary school, my brain starts to change. I start noticing more people around me. I notice the socio-emotional interactions going on around me, and I start to compare myself to others. That's the psychology that primary school students are going through, elementary school students, right? And as is being noted here, then they start seeing things like they want to be recognized, they want attention, they start having confidence or self-confidence issues, right? And of course, these kind of things play into, let's start having competition. This is when boys start fighting. This is when girls maybe start getting catty with each other, right? And there's little gossip groups and all of these things. This is the natural human condition. And students tend to get kind of competitive. Now, we can use that in a positive way, right? And one way we can do that, yeah, stages of human development, says Dennis, very true, right? One way we can use this is to apply Bartle's taxonomy of gamers, right? Why am I talking about Bartle's taxonomy here? Does anyone know this? Does anyone know Bartle's taxonomy? Has anyone heard of this before? Anyone at all? This morning, no one had heard of it, which is fine. That's why I'm teaching it to you, right? You haven't heard of it, that's fine. Okay, so let me explain quickly why I'm talking about gamers first, and then I'll explain Bartle, right? Gamers operate, the way that gamers think is really, really important when you have a game. And in learning management systems, you can have games, right? You can have a game like this. This is basically snakes and ladders. We have a little pigeon here. He's already partway through the game. He started down the bottom and he's making his way up like this to get to the finish over here. But as he goes, he can run into some obstacles, right? So if he runs into a platform that looks like this one here, then actually it opens and he drops back down to a lower level. Okay, so this is a game where you have, you're trying to win, you're trying to get to the finish, right? And when the pigeon eventually gets there, he'll get there. But along the way, you're having to practice language to take your turn. So this is one of the activities where we're dragging and dropping words into the appropriate object to say that we know the vocab word, right? Students are obviously doing this by themselves, but eventually their pigeon gets to the end and they win, okay? So this is a game, but this game will be played by different people in different ways, Okay, and this is Bartle's taxonomy of gamers. So I'm going to show you two different ways or two different views on this idea. One is this idea that you have four different types of people. One type of person is an explorer. One is a competitor. One is a creator or a decorator or a builder, right? And another one is a collaborator or a sharer, okay? These are some of the less harsh words maybe you want to use for Bartle's taxonomy. Here are some words that are a little bit more harsh. Killers, okay? Achievers, explorers, and socialites, right? These words are a little bit more pointed, right? I think you can figure out which ones go with which across the two groups here. But yeah, each of these people does the game in a different way. So if I've got things going on in my class and I'm thinking about these four types, then if I look at the killers, if I look at the explorers, excuse me, they're the ones who want to uncover all of the content. They want to find out all of the different options and what can happen with everything, right? And they are maybe a bit like Dave. They will just keep trying everything until they've discovered everything that's there, right? Remember, Dave didn't get 100% on everything, but he was getting through, trying to get through everything, right? So Dave would be maybe an example of an explorer, right? We've got achievers. Now, achievers want to get 100% on everything, right? They will keep trying until they get 100. Which of our students was like that? Which of our students, out of Amy, Bill, Carol, Dave, and Ed, which one was a bit like that? Maybe a bit like Bill, maybe, right? Could have been. So Michaela's saying a bit like Bill, okay? Thing with Bill is he got 100% his first time, right? Yeah. But it could be, remember Amy? Amy got 100% on almost everything, but it took her multiple times, right? So maybe Amy is more of an achiever. She wants to keep trying to get 100, right? Yeah. Okay. The socialites, right? Now, it's a bit hard to see the socialites, but maybe when you're doing a class activity, you have the socialites want to keep comparing results, right? And they're not doing it in a competitive way. They just want to know how everybody else is getting on, right? Maybe Dave is a socialite, right? Maybe Carol is a socialite, right? I'm not sure, right? But different students might want to share how they're doing with each other and figure things out together, or maybe work together on the answers, right? And then you've got the killers, right? They want to beat everybody, be first to finish, number one, right? They want to do this, right? Which of our students might be a killer? What do you think? Any ideas on who might be a killer in our group? Probably not Ed, right? Right? Yeah, maybe Bill, right? Because he's just like, one time, go fast, finish, get everything right. And maybe that's why he got his older brother to help him with his homework. Maybe, I'm not sure, right? Remember I said that earlier, right? We don't know about Bill, right? But yeah, I think if you look at these different areas, can you think about your students and identify some of your students against each of these types? Are you able to do that? You've got a lot, right? Ed killed the assessment. Yeah. Yeah, you've got some students you're thinking of that are like this, right? Yeah. Okay. So the question is, how do you use the tool to motivate your different students, right? So some students are going to be motivated by 100%, right? Maybe I've got an achiever and they're not getting 100%. And I say to them, let me help you a little bit more so that you can get 100%, right? Let me work with you a little bit more to do that. And maybe that's the way I reach out to my achiever, right? Maybe my killer, I just make it hardcore competition and I just say, right, how fast can you get 100? Go, right? And that's the way I motivate them. And then I give them another one and say, go again, right? And let them try harder and faster, right? So it could be that kind of thing. Maybe with the explorers, it's just, have you figured out all of them yet? Did you get to them all? Did you see them all, right? Tell me what you saw, right? And then maybe the socialites, I'm going to do some sort of peer activity where the students can maybe correct each other. They can work together. And maybe that's the way I get my socialites going in my class, right? But I can use my data to help identify what I can do with my students, right? Yeah. Achievers, yes, so Marisha's saying, achievers can be a little bit related with killers, maybe. Yeah, sometimes you can be more than one person, right? You could be an exploring socialite, right? You could be a killer and a socialite, right? You could be a lot of different things. So there's a lot of ways that we can put these things together. Okay, good. But think about, how do you use this in class, right? Okay, now one way that you'll see that the system deals with, say, achievers or explorers as well, is when students finish activities. This is a student view. They get ticked off for having done different activities, right? You can see here they've done one grammar activity, and when they finish the other ones, this will change to a tick, right? And as the students do things, they're getting these achievement marks or their exploration marks as they go through, right? And when other things is like they finish certain things, and then they get little messages popping up. You're doing it, well done, great, keep going, good job, right? They get these little messages popping up, which for some students may be motivating, depending on their type, to let them know that they're doing well and keep them moving forward, okay? So as the students are doing these things, yeah, they're getting some motivation depending on their type, right? Here's a different progress view for a different type of student. It's in the same system, right? But this is a different way of motivating them. Here we've got some, we call these things stickers, right? And you can see that this one and this one is slowly being exposed based on how much work they're doing and how well they're doing in that work, right? So at the moment, we've got a student having done some assignments. Now, if I go to the next page, let's see what the difference is. It's quite small. What difference do you see? Okay, so if I go back and then I come forward again, do you notice a difference here? What difference do you see? Anything here? Okay, maybe it's too subtle. There's actually a little change here. The student is completing some of the grammar work. So if I jump back, they hadn't done any here. Now they've done some. So it's like a progress bar. It's filling up as they do the activities. There's another way students can measure their progress and have some motivation depending on their type, right? Okay. If I go to the next screen, as the student completes some of that work, oh, now things have changed a lot more. Oh, more of this sticker is opening up, and this one started to open up too. Wow. What's that animal there? Is that an animal under there? What are we seeing? And so this is where you're motivating different types of students with, you know, explorers. What are the stickers, right? For some of the, maybe the killers, they're just like, let me get through all the activities, right? But what are the different things that we're seeing as we go through this, right? And this is ways that students can be motivated, especially younger learners, by this kind of thing, to keep practicing. And that's the point, right? We want them to keep practicing and succeed, okay? Yeah, they get excited when they start seeing these things. Like, oh, what is that? Let me keep going so I can figure out what that is, right? Nice, okay. Good job. Okay, so moving forward, we've got about 13 minutes left, so let's keep going. Okay, again on the parent view, this is the parent view, and the parents can motivate the students as well by looking at the parent view and saying, look, you've got everything right except this one. Can you do it again and get 100, right? Can you do that, right? And so parents can motivate their students forward as well by showing the parent view and the scores to the students too. So again, lots of different views and ways that we can keep motivating the students with this kind of visualizations and data, right? Nice. Okay, now one more time, numbers, are you ready? It's the same number. Here we go, 6, 4, 5, 7, 9, 2, 9, okay? Good job. Okay, now I have another set of numbers for you, a different set of numbers, okay? So here we go, we're gonna go through these ones. You're gonna see a new number 4 times. So say it with me 4 times. Here we go. 7513032. 7513032. 7513032. 7513032. Okay, good job. Now what I'm gonna do is, I need to do a little activity with you, okay? Why are you guys writing in the chat box? What's the purpose of that? You don't need to do that. Or are you just repeating them with me by doing them in the chat box? Okay, I'm gonna kill you in the chat box. I'm gonna put in a lot of X's there. Okay. Okay, so last kind of main point I wanna make here is I've been talking a lot about practice, but not all practice is equal, okay? Some types of practice are much more effective than other types of practice, okay? And we're going to see that now, okay? So what I want you to do is don't look at the chat box because that's cheating, okay? What I want you to do is on a piece of paper, don't use the chat box, on a piece of paper, write down the 3 numbers or use your phone or something, write down the 3 numbers as best you can remember them, okay? Okay, don't worry about, don't put them in the chat box, just write them down as best you can remember them, ignore the chat box, that's cheating, okay? And see if you can recall those 3 numbers that we went through, okay? Now that you're doing that, in a second, I'm going to show you the numbers, and then I'm going to put up a poll, and I'm going to ask you to self-assess. Did you get the first number 100% right, part right, or yeah, I didn't remember? Second number, did I get it right, part, can't remember, third number, okay? So I'm gonna put the numbers up on the screen now. Okay, so here are the numbers. You can self-assess. Okay, there's the 3 numbers. And I'm going to open up the poll. And I want you to tell me in the poll how you did on each of those 3 numbers, right? So when you've got a chance, look at the numbers, compare your result, and go into the poll. Here we go. We've got some data coming in. This is great. This is a live memory retention psychology experiment. We're doing this live, right? Let's see. Now, I know some of you have cheated a little bit. Okay, I know some of you are looking back at the chat box. You're disturbing the data. Okay, right? But this will still be interesting, right? I'll give you another. We've got 37% people, and let's see if we can get to 50%. We've got time, so let's see if we can get 50% of people. 43. Get a few more if we can. Okay, I'm going to stop at about, I'll stop at about there. There we go, 45%, that's good enough. Okay, so now people who maybe are watching the recording later can't see the results you're seeing, so I'm going to put these numbers on the screen, okay? 14% of people got this one 100% right, 54 got it part right. This one, 24% of people got it right, and 53 got it part right. And the one at the bottom, 34%, and 45, oh, that's interesting. So this one here, if I add those 2 together, that's about 80. And this one is 77, that's pretty close to 80 as well. And this one is significantly less. It's maybe, what's that, 68, let's call it 70, right? Okay, so what do you notice about the numbers that we've got on the screen there? Did we learn anything there from the different ways we practiced those different numbers? What do we see out of that, right? Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a memorization task, okay? Your math is good, okay? You've learned that you're really bad at memorizing, okay, good. Okay, it is the more you practice, the more you remember it, as Natasha's saying, but actually you read each of those numbers the same number of times. You read each of them 4 times. So the numbers that you had higher % recall on were not numbers you practiced more. They were numbers you practiced differently. Okay, the last one was easier to remember, right? That is true because it's proximity to the test. You study right before the test, you will remember more, right? Okay, but it's interesting comparing these 2, right? The one you did right at the beginning and the one where you kind of staged it out, you got very different results there, okay? More people remembered everything there than the first one, right? How does this play into how we can help our students remember things and perform? Now, these are numbers, and reading the number on the screen is a very, very simple task, which you can do anytime I want you to. But let's say this was use a word in a sentence, okay? What this might show is that if you do that activity as soon as you get home from class, maybe by the time of the next class, you're not going to remember so well, okay? Maybe if you practice that consistently through the week, then your recall when you come back to class is going to be greater. Maybe if you study right before you come back to class, you'll do well. But then again, because it's been such a long time since class, will you really remember what to do with that because the teacher's not there with you right now? And your mom and dad don't speak English, so they can't help you. So there's a bit of a problem with that last one, right? Potentially, right? But the main point here is that different practice is different, gives a different result, right? So how do we use that idea? Let me stop sharing, clear the results there. And let's look at an idea. And the idea I want to give you is about memory and interval reinforcement, okay? And if you want to look this up later, look up Ebbinghaus forgetting curves, this guy, Ebbinghaus. I think it's two B's actually, Ebbinghaus, right? You can look this one up later. But if I said to you, I teach you something right now, I tell you something 100%, right? You now know it. How long does it take in time until you only remember half of it? In other words, you've forgotten half. How long does that take until you've forgotten half of something? Right? What would you think in the chat box? Is it weeks? Is it days? Is it hours? Is it minutes? Is it seconds? What do you think? Hours, says Mashiko. How many hours? 24 hours? 1 hour? What do you think? Give me a number. Give me some numbers. Number is data, right? Data is 40 minutes, says Simonette. 3 hours, 8 hours, 30 minutes, 24 hours. We got a lot of different opinions here, right? Now, it does depend on the type of information. It does depend on the context, right? And if you make it more interesting, kids remember it better. But a very typical number is people will forget something within about 20 minutes. That's a very sort of, maybe 30 if you're generous. 20 to 30 minutes, you will have forgotten half of something, right? And this is the way our memory works, right? Do you believe me? Some of you are going, no, I don't. So I have a question for you. At the beginning, I told you what lives in the house with me. Can you remember what lives in my house? Can any of you remember what lives in my house? A rabbit, true. There's a dog. How many? 8 people, good. 1 duck, that's good, that's specific. 8 people. 8 finches, no, there weren't 8 finches, there were only 3, right? I think I mentioned fish, that's true. Chickens, right? Someone this morning said a cat, and there was never a cat on the list. They're inventing things, right? Yeah, but this is the way we remember, right? And the way we forget, okay? So we do tend to forget things quickly. The question is, how do we beat the forgetting curve, okay? So one way we do that is we reinforce, okay? So what we do is as people start to forget, we reinforce, we review, we remind them of that thing, and it reestablishes that piece of knowledge. Then they begin to forget again, and then we reinforce it again. And then they begin to forget again, and then we reinforce again. But what you can see now is that they don't forget. They remember, they retain, okay? And this is the way we beat the forgetting curve. So if we can nicely stage the reviews and the practice, then what that do is it will enhance learning. It will help our students learn more effectively, right? Okay, so let's take a look at how we can do that with a learning management system. So let's say if I've got a class, let's say my class is on Monday and I'm not going to see my students again until the following Monday, so 7 days later, right? What can I do, right? Do I just give them on assignment and say, go do it? Or is that going to be like situation 1 or situation 3? How do I maybe help my students do better, right? What I can do is I can use the learning management system and the digital homework, and I can assign it on different days, right? So in a system like the one we use here, you have a start date and an end date. They cannot see it before this date, and when it gets to this date, it closes, and they cannot use it again, right? So maybe I'm teaching my students a bunch of vocabulary and grammar, like you can see on the screen here. So maybe what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to set you an assignment, and that first assignment is only going to be those vocabulary items there, okay? So today, maybe my class is today is 10-8, right? For me here in Taipei. So maybe I say, okay, that homework you can do tonight, but it's going to close tomorrow, okay? And then I'm going to set another homework in the system covering these items. And I'm going to make that start on 10-10, and I'm going to close it on 10-11. So you've got 2 days to do it, and then you can't see it anymore. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this, and maybe say 10-12 to 10-13, okay? And then I'm going to see you on 10-15, so maybe this one, I'm going to set on 10-14. You have to do it the night before class, and it closes on 10-15, right? Maybe that's the way I set my assignment. and I'm setting them vocab and grammar so that they get little bits of all of the different assignments, and then they're just getting a lot of repeated practice at those different things, right? Do you see how this might work to help your students retain more and practice in a better way? Yeah. Okay. Now, is this complicated to do? Depends on your system. Not all learning management systems are created equal. In the system that I have here, if I was to jump in and do it, I'm a practiced user at the system. I can set up an assignment for my class in about 20 seconds. It does not take me a long time to do. So I could take 2 minutes and I could set up my 4 assignments. You know, I could go assignment 1 done, assignment 2 done, set the dates. It's all ready to go for my students. They can't see it until it opens. It might take me 2 minutes to set up, okay? But it's of better benefit than maybe some other ways of assigning all of that work for my students, right? So yeah, so have a think about how well you can utilize different systems to create this kind of stepped or staged practice and reinforcement for your students. Okay, interesting? Useful? Okay, good job. Nice. Okay, so let's quickly review. Let's just wrap this thing up here. Okay, so I talked about some student benefits. So more practice that you can get with a learning management system, but also well-timed practice. Okay, we can space it out to be really effective. Okay, teacher benefits, we need a lot of data to get information to make decisions, right? That's what a learning management system is really, really good for. Okay, for parents, they can know what's happening. The more they know, probably the more satisfied they are. Even if the results aren't great, if they know, then they'll probably be more satisfied. And then overall, if you're in a for-profit school, that's going to help your business. If you're in a public school, that's going to help your career if your students are getting really good results, right? So I hope you can see the benefits of this kind of system and how you might utilize some of the different features to help your students and thereby also help yourself. Okay, great. So I'm wrapping it up there. What I'm going to do now is, I know we may have some Q&A, but just because we're right on the hour, I think what we might do is quickly walk through some closing points that we just want to mention quickly. I'm just going to run through them really fast. And Dave, if I forget anything, please let me know. And then we'll come back to any Q&A that you have. Okay, great. So just to let you know a couple of things that are going on. We do have an event coming up that you can contribute to. It is called Learning Moments, okay? And this year we're running it as a chance to develop yourself, but also it's your chance to appear in a professional development book that one of our authors is working on at the moment, okay? So what you can do is you can think about how have you been helping your different students with maybe your online lessons or your blended, like face-to-face online, asynchronous kind of lessons. What have you been doing that's working really, really well, okay? And you can share that by making a little video explaining what you did, okay? Or you can send in a photo and a bit of a description about what you did, and you can upload it to this particular website here, okay? And in that way, you can share some of your ideas with the teaching community, and we're going to take some of the best ideas and give them to these two people. This is Dr. Joan Kang Shin and Dr. Jared Borup, and they're currently putting together a book, a professional development book about working in an online asynchronous blended kind of environment, breaking through the screen. So they're working on that now, and if you have some really great ideas in categories that are of interest to Joan and Jared, then they may take your ideas and ask your permission to put them in their book to share with other teachers. Okay, cool. So this is a chance for you to do that. You'll see more information in the emails that follow up on this webinar as well. Okay, great. And do feel free to join us for other webinars. You can always find us here. Oh, excuse me, don't cross it out, here. And also go to our InFocus blog and see ideas there. As part of the follow-up. And remember, just to note, because I've seen some people asking about it as well, we will send you the recording of the session. We will send you the certificate, and we will send you these slides with some of my notes on them. They will come out about 5 days from now, okay? So probably like next Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that, okay? Great. Okay, so if you have to head away, feel free, but I'm gonna jump back and look at some of the Q&A now. Okay, Dave, did I miss anything before we get into Q&A?
You did not miss a thing.
Thank you very much, sir. Good to know I'm playing the role. Here we go. Very nice. So let's take a look at Q&A. I'm looking at the chat box and I'm looking at the Q&A box here. Let's see what we've got. Margarita's asking, will there be a link for a survey? Yes, that will come out to you. Oh, actually, Dave, do you have the link for the survey you can drop in the chat box?
The survey, as soon as we close the session, everyone will be sent a link to the survey.
There we go. Thank you, Dave. So we've answered that one. Very nice. Lenny's asking, which learning management system do you use? Now, by you, me, I'm using the National Geographic Learning Management Systems because if I'm working with that material, then I'm using the system that goes with that. So I'm using the custom-built National Geographic Learning System that goes with the content from National Geographic Learning, right? There are other different systems out there. I know of some generic ones. I know of some other ones as well. We're not going to talk about other ones because we're not, because we work for a particular publishing company, we're not really allowed to promote or say anything pros or cons about other systems too much. But I would just say, if you're interested in different systems, just go do your research. A lot of people out there have a lot of opinions and good information about those systems. Just go and look up what you can find and find a kind of system that works for you. I've tried many different systems. Some work for me, some don't. Find something that works for you. Because even if it doesn't have all the same bells and whistles, if it works for you, then that's going to be more beneficial for you probably, right? What were the three numbers again, asks Gabriella. Does anyone remember? Good question. Very nice. Okay, couple of others. How do you identify students if they're within those four types of students? Okay, so Jeremiah, you're talking about Bartle's taxonomy, right? The thing with Bartle's taxonomy, with anything in psychology that I'm really careful with, is I try not to pigeonhole or box my students into a particular type. I think psychology usually talks about people being on a spectrum, okay? I have elements of all four types in my personality, right? And that will be the same for your students, okay? And that may change over time as well. So don't try and create boxes for people would be my suggestion, but identify the qualities. So if you see an explorer trait, then how do I use that to advance learning in that student? If I see an achiever trait, how do I utilize that? And your students will have many different traits, right? So just observe and know what you're looking for, I think is the main thing, right? Very cool. Laura, you said there in the box, is the National Geographic system for free? It's for free with our programs, right? So if you get the program, then the learning management system just comes as part of it, right? In fact, if a student purchases a book retail, which you can do, or a freelance teacher purchases a book retail, there is a code in the book that lets you access the system just for one-to-one kind of practice. So if you want to find out more about that, just ask some questions. We can help you with that as well. Okay, great. Jeff, you just had the same question in the chat box, I think, right? Very good. Okay, what else do we have here? That one's good. Thank you for the thank yous, Jeremiah. Yuanda's asking, what would you do if you have a student who has low self-esteem? It's very low, okay? Then pretty much I'm going to try and enhance their self-esteem, right? The thing I find with esteem is a little bit like the thing I find with learning, actually, is like every student starts at a level, right? And we usually want them to be somewhere different, somewhere higher, but they can't get there in one big jump. It's going to take baby steps, right? One little step, and then one little step, and then one, and hey, we made it, right? And so with students who have very low self-esteem, it's going to be finding those very small things that they can do that help slowly build their esteem, right? It's not a magic process. It's hard work, right? It's baby steps. And it is just literally finding those small successes to help push them forward. I think the only other thing I would say is try to find any sources of negative esteem that they're getting, right? For example, being picked on, places where they're failing unnecessarily, something like that, that maybe you can block or stop so that it doesn't drag them back down to the bottom again. But yeah, there's a lot we could talk about with that. I'm not going to talk about it anymore right now, I guess, just for time's sake. But yeah, baby steps, right? Baby steps. Try to keep moving them forward. Okay, good one. Okay. Jeremiah, this is one more. Sorry, Dave. There's one really good
more, and then I think, unfortunately, I will need to leave. And if I leave, everyone has to leave.
Everyone leaves. Yeah, sorry, Dave. Yeah, Jeremiah just asked about students getting the answers from somebody else, maybe from online, from an older brother, like I mentioned, something like that. That's the one where whatever you do in an online system, where you cannot observe the student, you need to back up with things where you can observe the student, right? So give you an example. If Bill is getting 100% on everything on his online work, and when he comes to class, he can't do everything to that same level, that raises a flag for me. And it says, maybe I need to check in with the parents to check how's he doing the homework, or is he being helped? Because I'm not seeing it reflected in what happens in class, right? So that's kind of what you look for, is just when you get discrepancies or differences, and then use that as a way to take action, to maybe talk to some people and try and figure out what's going on, okay? So that's kind of a shorter answer, but I think that'll give you the main point. Okay, so Dave, I think I'm going to pass it back to you, sir. All yours.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So I know we have a lot more questions, and I'm so happy to see the amount of engagement. Unfortunately, we do need to end our session now because we need to move on with other sessions and other National Geographic Learning professional development moments. So as Andrew mentioned, everyone who attended the session today will receive their certificate, as well as the recording and also the slides within the next 5 business days at the email that you used in order to register for this session. Additionally, as soon as I close our session today, you will be provided a quick survey that you can use to let us know how we did, whether or not you found today's sessions useful, whether or not you thought we could improve, and just let us know what you'd like to see from us in the future. So again, thank you so much for your attention and your engagement. I know I'm so thrilled that you were able to join, and I know Andrew is as well. And we look forward to seeing you again at another National Geographic Learning webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you soon.